Hello, here's my presentation number two, focusing on the area of sentencing. So the current event that I chose for this section is from Cal Matters, and it's an article titled "California Shrank Prisons with Sentencing Changes, and a New Study Shows How That's Working." And it was published September 25th, 2025. And the main idea is that California is passing multiple sentencing reform laws, or they have passed, that are letting certain incarcerated people to petition for resentencing or early release. And the major finding of that report is that older people released after longer sentences had very low recidivism, which is important for discussions about like public safety and what we want to prioritize, or they want to prioritize based on cost and rehabilitation and whatnot. So overall, this study looked at reforms from 2012 to 2022, and they found that around 12,000 people were resentenced and 9,500 were released. So here's a screenshot of the article on the left, and then some of the major policies that they changed between 2012 and 2022 that contributed to the prison population reductions that they saw. Some of these policies were the three strikes law, which allowed resentencing for certain non-serious, non-violent life sentences. And then they also had reduced penalties for some drug and petty theft offenses. But overall, they were not just like getting rid of people at random. These reforms were specifically meant to reduce overcrowding and be cost effective, but still ensure public safety. So this current event connects to Chapter 9 mostly, where it talks about the 5 goals of punishment and how sentencing reforms are competing and change these goals. So first we have retribution, which is the idea that punishment is deserved because of the harm that it's caused. However, this article is showing how resentencing and changing these policies can correct punishments that are no longer proportional after these updated laws, making sure that the punishment is still deserved. So second, deterrence is the goal of discouraging future crime through the threat of punishment, and this is done through long sentences and threatening that imprisonment. Now, this study is showing that simply making the sentences longer is not automatically preventing future offending. And it's showing that some groups, especially people resentenced for low-level offenses, have higher rates of new convictions, showing that deterrence depends on more than just sentence length alone. Third, incapacitation is simply removing someone from society so they can't commit more crimes while they're incarcerated. And the California findings are challenging this overall approach to incapacitation, since people who are older and had served long sentences showed low recidivism rates after release. So this means that this continued incarceration may not be required and could be wasting money. Fourth, rehabilitation focuses on helping people change so they can return to society successfully. And California's resentencing policies reflect this goal by allowing sentence review based on positive conduct or changes in the law. So basically recognizing that people can change and that sentencing can be adjusted when the risk of them recommitting a crime decreases. Fifth, restoration focuses on repairing the harm done by the crime and creating healthier communities. And by reducing unnecessary imprisonment caused by these resentencing reforms, that's going to allow money to be used for other services and could help victims in community reintegration, for example. So for my visual analysis section, I chose 2 visuals, the one on the left being recidivism rates in California over time with a age demographic on the bottom, and then the right chart being incarceration rates in California and the United States over time. So first, the incarceration rate visual is showing the clear decline in California from 2014 to around 2023, while the U.S. is declining less. So this is showing how the sentencing reforms weren't just insignificant change, and they actually had a real effect on how many people are incarcerated. And that's connecting to Chapter 9, since incarceration levels are basically a direct result of sentencing policy decisions. And the second visual, the recidivism chart, is showing recidivism is higher for younger people and then drops off a lot as age increases. And so that matters since it's supporting what the study found, which is that older people released after longer sentences are tending to have lower rates of committing new crimes. And so basically these visuals are helping to show why sentence review or resentencing can make sense, and especially when someone's risk level or is changing over time. So for the local application, I focused on Annapolis, Maryland, because that's where I live. And also it's conveniently where Maryland is creating its sentencing laws through the Maryland General Assembly. And similar to California, Maryland's also moved towards sentence reform. The first example being the Justice Reinvestment Act, which focuses on reducing incarceration for nonviolent cases and improving rehabilitation and reentry into society. Another example is the Second Look Act, which allows people who have committed crimes as young adults to petition for sentence review after serving a large portion of their time. And they also abolished the death penalty in 2013, which shows the state moving away from the harshest version of retribution. So the main takeaway is that Maryland basically is trying to be progressive and change their sentences or sentencing policies to reduce overly harsh sentencing, and doing so in a case-by-case approach. So before looking at Chapter 9 and specifically sentencing, I mostly thought that longer sentences had to be better. Obviously, that cost more money, but if we can put these harmful people away, that would mean more safety for the society, right? But after seeing how you can take some of this data from specifically, I guess, California in this example, and how analyzing that under the right conditions and to understand how recidivism is dropping with age, it made me realize how longer sentences are obviously not always better. And for a functional criminal justice system, we need to make decisions that are obviously best in all situations, thinking about cost and whatnot, as well as public safety. So, and also making sure that the criminals themselves are not being unfairly punished. So the biggest question that I came to was, when does a sentence stop being about safety and start being unnecessary punishment? And I thought that question mattered a lot because sentencing should still be proportional and realistic, not just for the long, or not just long, right, for the sake of punishment. So for my comparison, I compared California and Maryland's approach to sentencing reform, since I thought it was interesting looking at how the different states are going about this. So California's side is a lot more broad and affects a lot more people. The resentencing laws are statewide reductions, while as Maryland's side is more cautious, focusing on more sentence review through the Second Look Act instead of large-scale resentencing. And then obviously in the middle, both states are trying to reduce this unnecessary incarceration while still focusing on public safety and fairness. So overall, California is focusing on like bigger changes faster, and Maryland is having more gradual reform and individualized review on a case-to-case basis. And lastly, here are my references, including the textbook. Thank you.